Okay, so did you have any difficulty filming in foreign countries?
Um, as a rule, no. I mean, getting in and out with your equipment is always a hassle. Um, I mean, depending on foreign countries in Africa, I think you just count on being held up at some stage for money. Um, I had quite a time in South Africa um, filming an archaeology show in the height of apartheid and protest because the scientist who was advising us was also a flaming liberal Jew, and we were suspect just because we were associated with him. And we would go out every day to the digs and the various places we were going, and we'd be followed by the secret police. And this went on for days and days. And I knew about it because the people at the hotel had said, people have been making inquiries, I just want you to know. I said, well, who? I said, well, the authorities. And, so we knew what we were up against. And eventually, well, specifically, one day we were late and we were driving fast along bad roads, and we made a quick turn, and dust everywhere. Our pursuers, our followers, couldn't see us very well. So they got over anxious and they made the same turn and behind us, but much too close. Normally they were far back and very discreet. And we'd made the wrong turn, and it was a dead end. And we sort of whipped around the turn and came to a dead stop, and they came right around behind us and practically bumped bumpers. And we were face to face. And at that point, one of our crew, who spoke Afrikaans, or spoke Dutch, close enough, got up and went over and said, "Hi, I'm Rudy." And we all shook hands. They kind of embarrassedly. And we went on and did our business, and they stayed with us. Next thing you knew, we were sharing drinks and sandwiches. Um, and they realized we were doing what we said we were going to. And a couple of days after that, one came up really sadly and said, well, we've been reassigned. And we were sorry to see him go. So, you know, in general, you encounter a lot more understanding and kindness and human nature than you might otherwise think.
Moving on to Sports Illustrated, which was a syndicated series.
Yeah,
How did you come to produce that series?
that was out of the previous association with Time Life. Somebody we met at Time Life Books had moved on to Sports Illustrated, and they came to Erwin and me and said, well, you've the only guys who've done something with a magazine that succeeded, so why don't you do something for us? So it was blue sky, clean sheet of paper, wonderful opportunity, and we devised a series of hours called Sports Illustrated, um, and made, I think, 3 shows, which were syndicated, and they were not inexpensive. Um, they were sort of quality sports, if there is such a thing. Tried to do it with more depth and more intelligence than normal sports coverage, and got a lot of support from the magazine. And the first show didn't do very well, and suddenly they pulled out. Just all in the space of a year, we spent several $1 million, created this whole enterprise. And it was almost like they got in on a whim and got out on a whim. But that's another one I regret, because I should have fought. We should have fought much harder for that. I meet people today who saw the show and remember, even then, say, "Did you make that?" If we'd held on for 2 more shows, we'd have had a hit, I'm sure.
What was the concept of the show?
Well, it was a magazine show. Nothing more than, to be about sports and sports figures, and try to, do more on television than is normally done, more than scores. We did a piece on a basketball recruitment kid from Bedford-Stuyvesant going to the University of Las Vegas to be recruited by Tark the Shark Tarkanian. He's a notoriously um, cutthroat basketball coach who was known to break all the rules and who, for some strange reason, welcomed us with open arms and let us follow through the whole procedure of seducing the kids and taking them downtown to the strip with the older players who were their idols and saying, "Come here, you can have cars, you can have anything you like." Um, it was a wonderful piece. I don't think he ever got in trouble for it, but nobody had ever seen that on television. Um, we did a piece on the first, I think, on baseball pitches where we slowed down and showed you what the ball actually did. Um, it was neat,
Sounds great.
but just gave up too soon, and we let him.
So you're saying you would have fought harder with
Should have.
with the Sports Illustrated people?
Yeah, because we were so close to success. Just, a few more shows. Just hang on, guys.
Then did you then at ABC Entertainment, The Search? What was the pilot, The Search, and who was involved in that?
That was Alan Landsberg, and it was a pilot for a science series, probably ahead of its time. We did it with the New York Times science editor, actually Ted Harbert's father. How's that for television trivia? With Tom Snyder as host. And it was on ABC, it was off ABC, and that was that. Pretty good show, I think.
So it was just a pilot?
It's one of those things that went nowhere, yeah.
And then later on he went and did In Search Of, yeah?
He'd
Landsberg?
already
Oh, he'd
done
already-
In Search Of.
Okay.
It was over.
Okay. And then getting to Ripley's Believe It or Not, how is it that you came to be a producer and joined that series? And what was it about?
Well, that was, believe it or not, the concept explains itself. Jack Palance was the host, and old friends and colleagues, Jack Haley and Mel Stewart, were executive producers. And they were just getting started. I think it was their first season when our Sports Illustrated deal blew up. And Irwin went over to work on the series right away, and I followed, I think, a few months later. And it was a wonderful show. It was mostly kind of from the Walper days, so we all knew each other, knew how to work together, and we'd all been through mining various obscure sources of film and information. We knew how to do that. And we had network budgets to work with. And for me, just intellectually, I don't think I'll ever have a more rewarding thing to do, because you could take idle curiosity and just say to yourself, I wonder what, what, is this true? Are there pictures? Who knows about it? And have this tremendous reach, be able to put very smart young people to work finding out, gratify your curiosity, and sometimes the wildest surmises turned into the most wonderful stories.
Now, how did you confirm authenticity?
Well, I'd like to say because ABC was so strict about it, but the truth is they would accept any two written sources. And in some instances, it was the same article reprinted in two newspapers. So we skirted the line all the time. I am thankful for my geographic training, because they really are and were and still are very tough, and we were self-policing to a degree. But I think when we may have had some few pieces of film on. I mean, it's the old story, seeing is believing, and if there were convincing pictures, I don't think we went to great lengths to unmask. I mean, no one's perfect. Geographic had a show about the so-called lost tribes of Mindanao, a so-called Stone Age tribe discovered in the Philippines. which coincidentally I didn't have anything to do with, but if I had been on the spot, I think I would have made the same mistake. It was all pretty much of a fraud. Took years to leak out, but the show was withdrawn from circulation, and books had been written about it. And it's all, you know, they were not Stone Age people.
It was a fraud.
They were, yeah, they were people who had been discovered quite a long time ago. And I forget, there was a political reason to have that whole thing, whole story sold, but Geographic bought it. And all of us did at the time.
What was it like to work with Jack Palance?
Very.
Your co-stars, Catherine Sheriff, Holly Palance, and Marie Osmond.
They were all good. I didn't know Catherine hardly at all. I got to know Jack quite well. He, been around a long time, thoroughgoing professional. Could be very intimidating. Once I was recording him, I think things were a little tense anyway. His only problem was that he was sometimes tired. Like, I think most actors, when they're popular, they tend to overcommit. So they don't always have the energy that they should have when they come into the studio. Anyway, I was looking at my script, minding my business, sitting there in the control booth, and I was aware that Jack had stopped, and he sometimes did stop for a minute, take a little rest, start again. And then I was aware more time had passed, and more time had passed, more time had passed, and I was aware then somebody was standing beside me. I turned around, and I looked, and there was Jack's belt buckle. And he just quit in mid-performance and walked out, through the doors and into the control area, and I wasn't aware of it. But if you remember him in Shane, you know what he looks like when he wants to? He's just looking down at me, breathing, And after a long pause, he said, all right, if I take a little walk? I said, sure, Jack, sure, anything you like. And he was out of there, and he didn't come back for a long time. But he did, and we picked up where we left off. He was good. Holly Palance is the one that had the most trouble. Not Holly, Marie Osmond was the one who had the most trouble with it. I mean, she had no journalistic background. It was just hard for her to do lines without singing them. I'll never forget bursting into tears during a recording session. So you got to understand, this isn't my gig in life.
What was Mel Stewart's involvement with this show?
He was executive producer with Jack Haley, I think, or maybe Jack was senior executive producer. He was the straw boss. He was there every day. He was the man you had to please.
Now, what was the process in producing segments for that show?
We had two different kinds of segments. Probably most of what we did was from film already shot. So we had a tremendous film research department, and they were just combing the world for unusual film. And really, if you were doing one of those, somebody brought you some film, and you said, "Oh, that's fine." You made a deal. You edited it into a compact little thing. We would take great documentaries at an hour long and scrunch them down to a fast 2.5 minute, which sounds brutal, and I suppose from the filmmaker's point of view was, but I'm surprised how few people I meet since really mind or hold it against us. And, meet a filmmaker and, oh, you took my film and did that. And they usually laugh. But that was one, and we also commissioned a lot of shoots that, for economical reasons, were usually done by stringer crews that we only instructed by phone what we wanted. And because the series was well managed and went on for a long time, we got very good communication and synergy with them, and generally we got what we wanted. was a matter of editing them down to a very convenient little size, grouping them together into so-called acts, and narrating, remusicking, trying to make it look brand new.
What would you say were some of the highlights for you of that show in terms of your curiosity, or
Oh,
what worked for you?
well, I remember one. I mean, it was literally, for a compulsive reader like me or somebody who's interested in everything, it was great because you just, put your feet up on your desk and think of everything you'd ever heard of that was the least bit dramatic or funny. And one I remember well was Terry Koenig, my associate producer, and I were talking one day, and we had had great success with shows about accidents, crash dummies, National Bureau of Standards, fire tests, anything that, where things go terribly wrong visually is good television, and we were onto that. And I said, Terry, when I was in Holland, as I remember, the cars crash off the highway into canals a lot, and there are more people die by drowning than through physical trauma in car accidents. And I think there's some kind of thing where people are trained to get out of cars when they fall in the water. Well, Terry's a bulldog, and she went after it, and some researchers went after it, and one day on my desk comes this most incredible film about people being trained to get out of cars sinking in the water. And the Dutch, for whatever reason, had filmed this all themselves, this survival school for Dutch motorists. And you were inside the car as it was sinking down, and it showed you how they didn't wind the window down until the car was almost full of water because you couldn't get it open or you couldn't get out against the inrushing air and so forth. And it was just, as with many things, the truth exceeded your wildest imaginations, and it was on film, and you had it on the air, and everybody thought, how did you think of that?
So now, then after that, talk about the National Geographic special, Secrets of the Titanic, and when that was made, and why.
Well, why wasn't as obvious at the time as it would be now. Back in the early PBS days of Geographic, I'd met Bob Ballard, who was even then a rising star, oceanographer, explorer, and so forth, and we talked about the Titanic, finding it. He was convinced he could. I think he even jokingly said he'd take me along. But when he did, in fact, locate it, which was the summer of '85, I was doing something else. And I wasn't working for Geographic. I don't know where I was at the time, but I wasn't. Oh, I was doing Believe It or Not. Is that about right?
Yeah.
So I figured it was in good hands, that Geographic would be all over it and others. I was really surprised. I got a call from Bob, who said he was going out with the submarine Alvin to explore the Titanic within a few weeks. And he had tried to make a deal with Geographic and others, but it had all fallen through, and he wanted me to go as the producer-director on the expedition, paid, if necessary, by him. So I went to see him, and we talked about this, and this is one of those missed opportunities I'm talking about, because Bob was baffled. He couldn't understand why he couldn't make a deal, and he had an expedition to run. He knew that it would be great film and television. He knew that it should be done, and if I had simply said, Bob, leave it to me, I'll take care of it, will you just let me have the rights to this? Just the TV show's sake, TV rights. It would have been as easy as pie. I mean, he was ready to sign anything if I'd just get with him and help him sell it. And, if I had any real entrepreneur in my spirit, I certainly should have But I wanted to make sure I got paid, and I wanted to make sure that it was the crew that I needed, and it all seemed difficult. I came back here. I was negotiating with Bob's lawyer. We were close to a deal, but I still wanted a certain amount of cash before I left town to go on the Titanic expedition. And finally, at the last minute, really with less than a week to go, he did make a deal with Geographic. And Geographic hired me, and all my fears were put to rest, and I suppose a small fortune flew out the window. But it was amazing. I didn't know, no one knew how interested people were in Titanic. And I might have gotten the intimation because I talked to Walter Lord, who wrote A Night to Remember. And he told me the story of his writing career and how he'd done this and how he'd done that. And he was living from hand to mouth. And he wrote A Night to Remember and never had a hard day in his life after that. And he told me that how he came to write the book, or one of the things that led him to write it, was somebody told him that the Library of Congress said that in terms of popular interest of American readers, the three great subjects were the Civil War, Jesus Christ, and the Titanic. And he thought this must be a popular subject, and he assured me it was. So we were out there, and we found Titanic very easily. Bob had located it the year before. Alvin went down, started bringing up all these amazing pictures, and Bob, being the great PR man that he was, he'd dive all day and talk on the radio all night. So it was a building news story. But I had no idea. And one day a helicopter came out and picked up a little bit of video we were willing to release. And this is 400 miles at sea. There's only one super duper oil company helicopter that could do it. 3 networks got together and charted it. So I got a vague idea. And we're on our way back into Woods Hole after the expedition. I look and I can't even see the breakwater for the people. It was like Lindbergh, It was incredible. We brought the film back here, and it was the only time I've ever been afraid for the security of our material. We put it in a safe at night. The intensity, the lunatics that turned up at our offices. Poor Terry was pushing people away. That was something people really wanted to see. It was amazing. I think in documentary you probably only get that once or twice.
Did you ever twice like that ever?
I don't think so. Never anything that in demand.
So, just for the record, how did that show do in the ratings?
That did great. It was the highest rated original cable programming to that point. But the video was the big thing. It sold 100,000 units, which had never happened. And it's still the best-selling Geographic video ever. And with Cameron's movie, it started all over again. They sold another 75,000. And Cameron even had the decency in an interview to admit that seeing the documentary was the inspiration for the movie. So, we have all that that to take into account.
Wow. So, just for the record, what did Bob Ballard find? What did you find what did you learn from the wreckage?
Not a whole lot. There was a lot of talk about perhaps finding evidence that something sunk her other than what's supposed to. I don't think we did. There's some technical points about how long the gash was, but clearly it got ripped beneath the waterline. So many watertight compartments opened up and so forth. We didn't learn a whole lot, but we sure saw a whole lot. And for being down there for 74 years, it was extraordinarily like a big liner. And so many details were so obvious and clear, and it was so easy to find your way around. It wasn't the tangled hunk of metal I thought it would be.
Kinda like that truck in the pond.
Yes, well, exactly. See a continuity there? I didn't go down in that submarine either.
A rock wouldn't have gotten you there anyway.
No, wouldn't.
How about the National Geographic Special, The Explorers, and what was that about?
That was Geographic's 100th anniversary, 1988. It was founded in 1888, and they wanted a big show, and hired me to produce it. 2 hours for public television, or was it an hour and a half? Anyway, it was indeterminate length. We were just going to make it, and then we'd see how long it was. Great assignment. I'd worked for Geographic, but I knew very little comparatively about it. And then I, had the opportunity to take a lot of time and just root around and find out about the society and all its adventures. So it was a great job. Learned a lot. Solved the problem, which was really how to make a documentary that, was a self-portrait without making it excessively self-serving or boring, I think. It worked. And as a research job, we had we had a lot of latitude, good budget, and we just soaked ourselves in it.
Was it a lot of compilation?
Well, again, we shot a few things, but for the most part, yeah.
Great. Now, what about the realm of the alligator? Did you write that?
I wrote that.
You wrote that.
And that was just, I happened to be around, and it was a wonderful show. Don't remember anything particular about it.
Now, what was ABC Kane, and when was it in existence?
Well, this was my boss at Geographic, the successor to Bob Doyle, head of the Geographic TV department for a good number of years. I think 20 at least. See, he was assistant head in 1965, and we're now talking about when? 75, 85.
80.
Yeah, so anyway, Dennis finally left National Geographic, and ABC set him up with a company called ABC Kane, which was a wholly owned subsidiary of ABC, and he had good many years making similar shows for ABC independently.
And what shows did you do for them?
I did Beautiful Killers, which was killer whales. Had a fascinating time doing that. Was anticipated Free Willy and raised captivity issue, for instance, in a very mild way. Had a terrible time with the world's aquariums, who were so sensitive about where they got their whales and whether the whales ought to be let go, and they were suspicious of me and just getting entree to SeaWorld, for instance. Well, I never did get entree to SeaWorld, but it was doing it the hard way.
And what about, now, did you write Realm of the Serpent, or did you produce that too?
I wrote that for ABC Kane after doing Beautiful Killers, which was just a straight-out writing assignment.
Well, then, after ABC Kane, the national, oh, sorry.
We'll just keep going until you stop us.